Welcome to TechSphere podcast, where we're diving into PHP 8.4, new features and enhancements galore.
It's a big one.
It is a big one. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. So
Yeah.
PHP, it runs what? A huge chunk?
Most of the web.
Yeah, most of the web. So new releases, it's kind of a big deal for all of us.
Absolutely. Impact a lot of people.
We're going to be unpacking some seriously cool stuff today. Imagine cleaner code.
Yeah.
Your site's running faster, sound good.
Sounds like a dream.
All right, let's dive in.
So what's fascinating about PHP 8.4 is that it's not just about making little tweaks. It's about making life easier for developers.
Right?
And boosting the efficiency of websites. It's a win-win.
It is. Okay, so first off, PHP 8.4 officially landed on November 21st, 2024. One of the things that immediately grabbed my attention is this set of new array functions. We've got array find the key agony, and array. Less code, more efficiency. Sounds like a dream come true.
Absolutely. Developers use array operations constantly, and these new functions, they just streamline the process. So instead of writing a whole loop, to find a specific element in an array, you can just use array find. Boom, you've got your result. It's like having a specialized tool that simplifies the job, reduces the chances of errors.
Yeah, I can already see how much time this would save. Okay, so this next one sounds a bit technical, but it's super cool. Property hooks. I'm curious, what kind of real-world impact do these have?
So imagine you have a class property, and you want something specific to happen. Whenever that property is accessed or modified, property hooks give you that control. So for example, let's say you want to validate data before it's assigned to a property. With property hooks, you can set up a hook that triggers your validation logic every time someone tries to change that property's value.
Adding overhead. With all these checks happening behind the scenes,
That's a valid concern. While property hooks do add a layer of processing, they offer a significant advantage in terms of code organization and security. So instead of scattering validation logic throughout your application, you centralize it using hooks, making your code easier to maintain and debug. The performance impact is often negligible compared to the benefits of cleaner, more secure code.
so it's about finding that balance between functionality and efficiency. Okay. On to another interesting feature, asymmetric visibility. What is that, and why does it matter?
Asymmetric visibility. It allows developers to control access to properties in a more nuanced way. For instance, you can make a property publicly readable, but only modifiable internally within the class. This is crucial for security and maintaining the integrity of your data.
I'm seeing a theme here, more control and security for developers.
Yeah.
Okay, so this next one is a bit of a syntax tweak, but it really caught my eye. No more parentheses when chaining methods. Remember that new request example? It just looks so much cleaner without those extra parentheses.
It's true, it might seem like a small change, but removing the parenthesis when chaining methods, it has a big impact on code readability. So PHP 8.4 streamlined this process, and it results in code that's visually less cluttered, easier to scan. It's all about those small improvements that enhance the overall developer experience.
Smoother experiences. Let's talk about JIT, just-in-time compilation. PHP 8.4 introduces some changes to how JIT activation works. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. So JIT compilation, it's a technique that can make PHP code run faster. In PHP 8.4, they've simplified how you activate JIT. So instead of using the opcache.jit buffer size setting, you now use opcache.jitdisable to turn it off. While this might require a small adjustment for those who've configured JIT in the past, it makes the process more straightforward and consistent.
So essentially, it's a cleanup effort to make configuration less confusing.
Exactly. And don't forget the JIT compiler itself has been improved, which can lead to even better performance, so you get a cleaner configuration and potentially faster websites.
I always love when updates bring performance boosts. It's something everyone can appreciate, even if they don't understand all the technical details.
Absolutely. Speaking of updates, let's move on to one that's particularly relevant for web developers. Enhanced HTML5 support, the introduction of the DOM HTML document class. Seems like a pretty big deal.
It does, but I have to admit, I'm not fully up to speed on the intricacies of HTML parsing. Why is this new class so significant?
Well, HTML5 is the current standard for web development, right? And this new class is specifically designed to parse HTML5 code compared to the older DOM document class. It offers more reliable parsing and adheres to the latest HTML5 specifications. This means PHP developers have a more robust and accurate way to work with HTML content within their applications.
So it's all about ensuring that PHP can keep up. With the ever-evolving world of web standards, I can see how this would be a game changer for developers who work extensively with HTML.
Precisely. It's another example of how PHP 8.4 is evolving. to meet the demands of modern web development. Now, while all these new features are exciting, there are also a couple of deprecations in PHP 8.4 that developers need to be aware of.
You're talking about implicit nullable types. And get PHP sessions right. Those definitely caught my attention. Can you explain what they mean and why these changes were made?
Of course. Let's start with implicit nullable types. In previous versions, if you had a typed variable with the default value of null, it could be implicitly treated as nullable. This led to some ambiguity and unexpected behavior. PHP 8.4 deprecates this implicit behavior, encouraging developers to explicitly declare nullable types for clarity.
So it's a move towards more explicit coding practices, which ultimately leads to better code quality and fewer surprises down the road.
Exactly. Now, regarding the deprecation of get ppost sessions, this is primarily a security measure. Traditionally, PHP allowed session IDs to be passed through get or ppost parameters. However, this practice makes applications vulnerable to session hijacking attacks.
Wait, session hijacking. That sounds pretty serious. What exactly does that entail?
Imagine someone eavesdropping on your network traffic and stealing your session ID. With that ID, they could impersonate you and gain access to your accounts. It's a scary thought. To prevent this, PHP 8.4 encourages a cookie-only approach for session management, which is considered more secure.
That makes perfect sense. It's much better to be safe than sorry, especially when it comes to sensitive user data. It seems like PHP 8.4 is really stepping up its game in terms of security.
Absolutely. And to round things out, PHP 8.4 also includes a collection of smaller but still significant improvements. We have multi-byte trim functions, new rounding modes for the round function, and driver-specific PDO subclasses.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. Before we move on, can you give us a brief rundown of why those smaller features are noteworthy? I'm especially curious about those driver-specific PDO subclasses.
Sure. The multi-byte trim functions are helpful for developers working with internationalization and different character sets. They ensure that string operations are performed correctly regardless of the encoding. As for the driver-specific PDO subclasses, they provide a more granular level of control when working with databases, allowing developers to leverage the unique features of different database drivers. It's all about giving developers more tools and flexibility.
It sounds like PHP 8.4 is packed with features big and small, aimed at improving both the developer experience and the performance of web applications. We've covered a lot of ground already, but there's still so much more to explore. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve deeper into some of these features and discuss their implications for the future of PHP. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode with your fellow developers. We'll be back soon with more insights on PHP 8.4.
It's fascinating to see how much emphasis PHP 8.4 puts on making things easier for developers while boosting performance and security. It's like they took a step back and said, how can we make PHP even better for everyone?
Yeah, I totally agree. And that focus on developer experience is something I really appreciate. You know what really piqued my curiosity, though? The change to how JIT activation works. Can we circle back to that and dig a bit deeper?
Absolutely. It's one of those changes that might seem minor at first glance, but it has a ripple effect. Remember how we used to disable JIT by setting opcache.jit buffer size to 0f? Well, PHP 8.4 introduces a dedicated directive called opcache.jit. Now you simply set opcache.jit disable to turn it off.
Okay, that definitely sounds more straightforward. But couldn't this potentially cause issues for people with existing configurations?
Yeah, you're right. There could be some compatibility hiccups. So if someone had previously configured JIT using opcache.jit buffer size, but didn't explicitly set opcache.jit, they'll need to add opcache.jit tracing to their configuration to re-enable it. It's a small adjustment, but an important one to be aware of.
Good point. It seems like those little configuration details can sometimes trip people up, even if the underlying concept is simple.
Absolutely. Clear and consistent configuration is crucial, especially when dealing with performance optimizations like JIT compilation. Speaking of which, let's shift gears and talk about the enhanced HTML5 support in PHP 8.4.
Yes. The new DOM HTML document class is something that many web developers have been excited about. Can you explain what makes it so special?
Well, HTML5 is the dominant force in web development these days, right? This new class is purpose-built to handle all the intricacies of HTML5 code. It offers more robust and reliable parsing than the older DOM document class, ensuring compatibility with the latest web standards.
It's like they've given PHP a much-needed upgrade to keep pace with the ever-evolving world of HTML5.
Exactly. It's a big win for developers who work extensively with HTML content. It simplifies their workflow and makes it easier to create well-structured, standards-compliant web pages. But HTML5 support isn't the only thing that's been enhanced. Remember those multi-byte trim functions we mentioned earlier?
Oh, right. I'm actually curious about those. It seems like a rather specific addition. What kind of real-world problems do they solve?
These functions are a godsend for anyone dealing with internationalization. In today's globalized web, we often work with text in various languages and character sets. The multi-byte trim functions ensure that string trimming operations are performed accurately, regardless of the encoding.
That makes sense. In a world where websites need to cater to a diverse audience, those functions are probably more crucial than ever.
Absolutely. And it highlights PHP's commitment to becoming a more versatile and globally aware language. Now let's not forget about another important aspect, security. PHP 8.4 brings some significant changes to the table in that regard.
You're talking about the deprecation of get p post sessions, right? We touched on it briefly, but I think it deserves a deeper dive. Why is this change such a big deal?
It boils down to mitigating the risk of session hijacking, allowing session IDs to be passed through GET or POST parameters, created a vulnerability that attackers could exploit. By deprecating this practice and encouraging a cookie-only approach for session management, PHP 8.4 significantly enhances security.
So it's like they're closing a loophole. That could have had serious consequences for both businesses and users.
Precisely. It's a proactive measure to address a potential security threat. And it reflects a growing awareness within the PHP community that security needs to be a top priority. It's not just about adding new features, but also about making sure those features are implemented with security in mind.
I completely agree. It's about building a more secure foundation for the web. Now, before we wrap up this part, I wanted to circle back to those driver-specific PDO subclasses you mentioned. What makes them so noteworthy?
So PDO, or PHP data objects, is a fundamental part of how PHP interacts with databases. These new driver-specific subclasses allow developers to tap into the unique capabilities of different database drivers. It's like having specialized tools for each database system, giving developers more control and flexibility.
That's really interesting. It seems like PHP 8.4 is all about giving developers the tools they need to build robust and efficient applications, regardless of the specific database they're using.
Exactly, and it's this attention to detail, combined with the focus on performance and security, that makes PHP 8.4 such a significant release. But all these new features and changes raise an important question.
And what would that be?
What does this all mean for the future of PHP? How will these changes shape the PHP ecosystem and the applications we use every day? Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore those questions and discuss the long-term implications of PHP 8.4.
Welcome back to TechSphere Podcast for the final part of our deep dive into PHP 8.4. We've covered a lot of ground, from those new array functions to enhanced security measures. It's clear that this update is a big step forward for PHP.
It really is. But what I find most intriguing is not just the individual features, but what they tell us about the direction PHP is heading.
Okay, so PHP 8.4 is like a roadmap to the future of the language. Let's talk about that. What are the long-term implications of these changes? What does this update tell us about where PHP is going?
Well, if you look at the trends we've been discussing, performance enhancements, a focus on security, cleaner syntax, more robust tools for modern web development, it paints a picture of PHP evolving to meet the ever-changing demands of the web.
So it's not just about keeping up. It's about anticipating what's next and providing developers with the tools they'll need to build the web of tomorrow.
Exactly. It's about shedding old habits, embracing modern programming practices, and ensuring that PHP remains a relevant and powerful force in the world of web development.
That makes a lot of sense. But what does this mean for developers who are already working with PHP? How can they stay ahead of the curve and make sure their skills are up to date?
I think the key is to be adaptable and embrace these changes. PHP 8.4 is a clear signal that the language is moving in a direction of greater efficiency, security, and developer friendliness. Learning the new features, adopting the new syntax, and understanding the reasoning behind the deprecations are all crucial for writing forward-compatible code.
So it's not just about learning the what, but also the why behind these changes.
Absolutely. Developers who understand the underlying principles. Driving these updates will be better equipped to adapt to future changes and make informed decisions about their code.
You mentioned that PHP is becoming more developer-friendly. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What aspects of PHP 8.4 contribute to a better developer experience?
Well, think about the things we've discussed. Cleaner syntax, features like property hooks that provide more control, and even small tweaks, like removing parentheses when chaining methods. These seemingly minor changes add up to create a more streamlined and enjoyable coding experience.
I see the benefits of those changes. But couldn't some argue that removing those parentheses might make the code less explicit and potentially harder for newcomers to understand?
That's a valid point. However, I'd argue that the improved readability outweighs that concern. The removal of those parentheses reduces visual clutter and makes the code flow more naturally. Plus, there are ample resources and documentation available. To help newcomers understand these changes, it's all about striking a balance between conciseness and clarity.
Okay, so we've talked about the implications for developers. How will these changes affect businesses and the web as a whole? How will PHP 8.4 shape the PHP ecosystem and the applications we use every day?
One of the most obvious impacts will be on performance. As PHP becomes more efficient, websites and applications will load faster, consume fewer resources, and provide a smoother user experience.
So faster websites, snappier apps, happier users. It's a win-win situation.
Exactly. And the increased focus on security means that applications built with PHP will be more resilient to attacks, protecting both businesses and their users.
It's like PHP 8.4 is laying the groundwork for a more robust
Is secure.
and user-friendly web.
Precisely. And with its vibrant community and dedicated developers, PHP is well positioned to continue evolving and adapting to the ever-changing landscape of web development.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into PHP 8.4. I hope you've enjoyed this exploration as much as we have. We've covered a ton of ground, from the technical nuances of new features to the broader implications for the future of PHP.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I'm excited to see how PHP continues to evolve in the years to come.
Absolutely. And remember, if you want to stay up to date with all the latest PHP news and developments, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode with your fellow developers. Until next time, happy coding.